In something straight out of a James Bond movie, on 17th and 18th September 2024, thousands of handheld pagers and hundreds of walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah, a Lebanese armed militant group and a political party, exploded in simultaneous attacks across Lebanon and Syria. As of 19th September, 37 people had been killed, including at least 12 civilians. According to the New York Times, Israeli intelligence service Mossad had manufactured the devices. The incident was described as the organization's biggest security breach since the start of the conflict. Welcome to Everest 360. Today we discuss episodes of pager explosions in Lebanon and its effect in international law, and what makes Mossad the most lethal secret service agency in the world. Mossad, Israel's intelligence service, is considered the best, if not the most lethal intelligence services in the world. It has a history of pulling off insane operations that seem impossible to carry out. One of Mossad's most famous operations was the capture of Adolf Eichmann, a key architect of the Holocaust in Argentina. Eichmann was brought to Israel to stand trial for war crimes. Operation Wrath of God was the name given to the operation that followed the Munich Olympics massacre. 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team had been killed during the 1972 Games. Israel had vowed revenge. Following the Munich Olympics massacre, Mossad launched a series of targeted assassinations against those responsible. This operation spanned several years across several countries. Operation Thunderbolt. This operation was a daring rescue mission carried out by Israeli commandos on July 4, 1976, and was launched in response to the hijacking of an Air France flight by Palestinian and German terrorists who diverted the plane to Entebbe, Uganda. The terrorists demanded the release of prisoners held in Israel and other countries. Israeli forces flew over 4,000 kilometers to Uganda and successfully rescued 102 hostages within 90 minutes. The raid is celebrated as one of the most successful hostage rescue missions in history. Mossad has been linked to various inventive assassination methods, including exploding books, remote-controlled machine guns, and poisoned toothpaste. Mossad operation is based on three characteristics: global reach, innovation, and secrecy. Mossad operates worldwide, often in hostile environments. The agency is known for its creative and often high-tech methods. Many operations remain unclaimed and shrouded in secrecy, adding to Mossad's mystique. Mossad's history is marked by a combination of daring, innovation, and controversy, making it one of the most formidable intelligence agencies in the world. The 17th September explosions, which involved pagers and took place around 3:30 p.m. local time, killed at least 12 people and wounded more than 2,750. Many of the casualties were Hezbollah members, including civilian members of Hezbollah. The 18th September explosion of ICOM walkie-talkies killed at least 25 people and injured 708. Other electronics, such as fingerprint biometric devices, were also reported to have exploded, but it is not confirmed if those devices caught fire from other explosions or detonated themselves. Sources say that Hezbollah bought the pagers and radios about 5 months before the attack. Blasts affected several areas of Lebanon, including Beirut's Dahiya suburb, southern Lebanon, and the Bega Valley on the border with Syria, which are considered to have a Hezbollah presence. Explosions were also reported in several locations in Syria. It was initially unclear whether only Hezbollah members were carrying the pagers, but later Hezbollah confirmed the pagers were distributed to low-ranking members. Around 150 hospitals across Lebanon received victims of the attack, which saw chaotic scenes. Among those killed were 2 Hezbollah operatives and 2 children. Iran's ambassador in Lebanon was also injured by an exploding pager. It is interesting to know why was Iran's ambassador in such close proximity to an exploding pager. But why were they using pagers? In February 2024, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, told the group's members to use pagers instead of cell phones, claiming that Israel had infiltrated their cell phone network. Hezbollah then bought a new brand of pagers, called Apollo AR-924 models imported from Taiwan. Nasrallah, responding to the explosions, described them as a major blow and labeled them as an act of war, and arguably a declaration of war by Israel. Hezbollah vows to retaliate. Following the explosions, Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, announced a new phase of war against the axis of resistance with a focus on the north of Israel, which borders Lebanon. A day after Hamas launched its 7th October attacks on Israel, Hezbollah joined the conflict in support of Hamas by firing on Israeli towns like Safed and Nahariya and other Israeli positions. Since then, Hezbollah and Israel have been involved in cross-border military exchanges that have displaced entire communities in Israel and Lebanon, with significant damage to buildings and land along the border. Over 96,000 people in Israel have been displaced, and over 111,000 people in Lebanon have been displaced because of this war. As of 24th August 2024, there were 564 confirmed deaths in Lebanon, including 133 civilians. Israel and Hezbollah have maintained their attacks at a level that causes harm without escalating into a full-scale war. Hezbollah said that it will not stop attacking Israel until Israel ceases its attacks in Gaza. Earlier on 17 September 2024, just a few hours before the explosions, the Security Cabinet of Israel established a new war objective: the safe return of displaced residents to the north. This goal was added to the 2 existing objectives: dismantling Hamas and securing the release of hostages taken during the 7th October attacks. Israel's domestic security agency, Shin Bet, announced it had thwarted a Hezbollah plot to assassinate a former senior defense official using an explosive device. While pagers were popular in the late 20th century, they have since largely been replaced by cell phones. Still, some Hezbollah members had used pagers for years before the 7th October attacks, but more members began using them after February 2024, when Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah called on members to stop using smartphones, citing Israel's capability to infiltrate them. Hezbollah subsequently ordered pagers, which were imported to Lebanon in the months before to the explosion. It was reported that the devices were compromised in Iran before being sent to Lebanon. The exploding pagers were the AR-924 model by the Taiwanese company Gold Apollo. However, Gold Apollo denied making the pagers, explaining that they were made and sold by Budapest-based Consulting KFT, which had a 3-year licensing agreement with Gold Apollo. Gold Apollo's founder, Su Jingguang, said that PAC's payments had been very strange, having been paid via the Middle East. Taiwanese police opened an investigation into Gold Apollo's involvement, searched 4 locations in Taipei and New Taipei City, and questioned 2 individuals. Both Economic Minister J.W. Ko and the Premier Cho Chong-dai denied that the pagers were made in Taiwan. PAC's chief executive acknowledged working with Gold Apollo, but stated, "I don't make the pagers, I'm just the intermediate." Hungarian government spokesperson Zoltán Kovács said that PAC's Consulting is a trading intermediary with no manufacturing or operational site in Hungary. It has 1 manager registered at its declared address, and the reference devices have never been in Hungary. The PAC executive was subsequently placed under the protection of Hungarian secret services. The New York Times reported that, in fact, the Israeli intelligence operated PAC Consulting and had created 2 other unnamed shell corporations to hide their involvement. Sky News reported a Lebanese security source which said that Hezbollah had ordered 5,000 devices. Israeli agencies have previously carried out operations involving explosive communication devices, notably the assassination of Hamas operative Yahya Ayash in 1996. An Associated Press report indicated that the devices were possibly rigged with explosives prior to arriving in Lebanon. The New York Times also reported that Israeli intelligence services intercepted the deliveries and rigged pagers with small amounts of explosives. Reuters reported an anonymous Lebanese source as claiming the devices had a board inserted into them which could detonate up to 3 grams of explosives upon receiving a code. Facial and eye injuries were the most common effect of the explosion, and according to Tracy Chamon, the pagers emitted a sound to encourage users to pick the devices up and lift them to their heads. Other reports say that the device vibrated and showed an error message on the screen and only detonated when the user pressed a button to clear the error, increasing the chance that the operator of the device would be holding it. The explosions occurred in several areas where Hezbollah has a strong presence, including its stronghold of Tahia in Beirut, southern Lebanon, and Bekaa Valley near the Syrian border, where explosions were reported in the towns of Ali en-Nahri and Riyak. In Syria, explosions of pagers were also reported in Damascus and its vicinity. There were early reports that 19 Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps IRGC members had been killed in Syria, but the IRGC later released a statement saying none of its members had been killed. Blasts reportedly continued to occur for up to 30 minutes after the initial detonations, intensifying the resulting chaos. Witnesses reported seeing multiple individuals bleeding from their wounds in the aftermath of the blasts. In one instance, an explosion occurred inside the trouser pockets of a man standing outside a shop. Photos and videos circulating on social media and local media from Beirut's southern suburbs showed individuals lying on the ground with injuries on their hands or near their pockets. Around 150 hospitals received victims of the attack, which saw chaotic scenes. Hospitals in southern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, and Beirut's southern suburbs were overwhelmed with patients, many suffering from injuries to the face, hands, and waist. In response, the Ministry of Health advised individuals with pagers to dispose of them and instructed hospitals to remain on high alert. It also called on health workers to report to work and asked them not to use wireless devices. The state-run National News Agency appealed for blood donations. Ambulance crews were deployed from northern cities of Tripoli and Al-Kalamun to help in Beirut. The attack came just a day after the Biden administration's special envoy Amos Hochstein visited Israel and warned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against provoking a major escalation in Lebanon. Just before the blast, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin that an operation was planned in Lebanon. About 24 hours after the initial explosions, a second wave of device explosions occurred in Lebanon again. Hezbollah stated that handheld radios were involved. The devices affected were reported as ICOM ICV-82 VHF walkie-talkies, which are known to be used by Hezbollah militants. The manufacturer of the ICV-82 model ceased in 2014, and ICOM had previously issued an advisory warning about counterfeit radios, including the ICV-82, and said on 19 September that it was conducting an investigation. A sales executive at the company's U.S. subsidiary said that transceivers involved appeared to be knockoff products. Second wave of explosions were reported in Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Lebanon. The explosions also caused fires in at least 2 homes. Other explosions occurred at a funeral held in Beirut for 3 Hezbollah members and a child who had been killed by the initial explosions. Smartphones, solar panels, radios, intercoms, and car batteries were among other devices that reportedly also exploded on that day. Lebanese civil defense said it responded to fires that erupted in 60 homes and shops, including a lithium battery store in Mossad, as well as 15 cars and numerous motorcycles. These fires were triggered by the explosion of radios and 2 fingerprinting devices in various locations across Nadiate Governorate. One compromised device was discovered inside an ambulance outside the American University of Beirut Medical Center and neutralized in a controlled explosion by the Lebanese army. In the aftermath of the second wave of explosions, a group of men attacked the vehicles belonging to United Nations interim force in Lebanon in the town of Tyre. Before the Lebanese armed forces intervened, Hezbollah supporters reportedly prevented journalists from filming. The Lebanese Red Cross dispatched 30 ambulances to transport victims. The total death toll from the attacks stood at 37 and included at least 12 civilians killed according to the Lebanese authorities. Most of the dead were believed to be militants, based on casualty reports posted by the group. At least 12 people were killed in the first wave of attacks. More than 2,750 were wounded. In the first wave, civilians were killed, including a 9-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. At least 2 health workers were also killed, along with the son of Lebanese MP Ali Ammar, a member of Hezbollah. Prime Minister Najib Mikati visited southern Beirut to pay respects to him. It was initially unclear if only Hezbollah members were carrying the pagers, but Hassan Nasrallah, during his speech, clarified the exploded pagers were those distributed to lower-ranking members, while the leaders did not use that particular model. In the second wave, on 18 September, at least 25 people were killed and 708 were injured. Health Minister Firas Abiad said the vast majority of those being treated in emergency rooms were in civilian clothing and their Hezbollah affiliation was unclear. He added the casualties included elderly people as well as young children. According to the health ministry, healthcare workers were also injured, and it advised all healthcare workers to discard their pagers. Mojtaba Amani, Iran's ambassador to Lebanon, was also wounded. According to the New York Times, quoting unnamed members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, he lost one eye and suffered severe injuries in the other. 2 staff of the Iranian embassy were also injured. Al-Haddad reported that 19 IRGC members were killed and another 150 were injured in Deir ez-Zor in Syria, but the IRGC denied any casualties. Now let's see how international law would perceive an attack like this. Josep Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, questioned the legality of the attacks due to their high collateral damage among civilians, including the deaths of children. Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, the United Nations Special Coordinator for Lebanon, also raised concerns that the attacks were illegal. Belgian Deputy Prime Minister Petra de Sutter went further, calling it a terror attack. The legal questions that we should use while examining this attempt to determine whether the attacks violated principle of distinction, including the prohibition against using booby traps and the principle of proportionality that is highly upheld in the realm of international law. The principle of distinction is a fundamental rule in international humanitarian law, specifically under the laws governing armed conflict, such as the Geneva Conventions. It mandates that parties engaged in a conflict must always distinguish between combatants, those directly participating in hostilities, and civilians, those not participating in hostilities, as well as between military objects and civilian objects. United Nations experts at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights said that the attack was indiscriminate in nature. They argued that given thousands of devices exploded simultaneously, meant the attacker failed to verify each target and distinguish between those who can be targeted and those who cannot. Alonso Gourmendi Doncoburg of the London School of Economics also argued in order to meet the principle of distinction, Israel would have had to verify if each individual device was in possession of a military target and not a civilian one. He opines it is unlikely Israel did that given that thousands of devices were detonated simultaneously. Professor William Boothby wrote in Libya Institute for Law and Warfare that the targets appeared to be persons to whom the pagers were issued, and it was probably reasonable to assume pagers would be in possession of their users. Many sources caution that under international humanitarian law, only combatants may be targeted. Anyone not taking part in hostilities cannot be targeted. While Hezbollah has a military wing, it is also a political party. Huwaida Araf pointed out that civil servants are considered civilians under international law unless there is evidence that they took part in hostilities. Professor William Boothby wrote that attacks on pagers would be illegal if it was known that pagers were also issued to non-combatant members of Hezbollah. For example, its diplomatic, political, or administrative staff. In addition to a political wing, Hezbollah also has affiliated charities that provide social services. For example, one of those killed was a hospital orderly carrying a pager at Al-Rasul Al-Azam Hospital, which is linked to a Hezbollah charity. Andreas Craig, a professor of security studies at King's College London, said it was likely the pager system was distributed among civilian members of Hezbollah, such as those working in charities or the civil service, and these people are not taking part in the hostilities. A booby trap is a hidden or disguised device intended to cause harm or surprise to a person when triggered. Booby traps are often set in such a way that they activate when someone unknowingly disturbs or interacts with them, such as opening a door, stepping on a pressure plate, or moving an object. These series of pager explosions also are a kind of booby trap. Any kind of booby traps are mostly outlawed under the Protocol on Mines, Booby Traps and Other Devices of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, to which Israel is a party. Article 7, Paragraph 2 of Amended Protocol 2 prohibits the use of booby traps or other devices in the form of apparently harmless portable objects which are specifically designed and constructed to contain explosive material. The rules of engagement of some countries, such as the United Kingdom, also ban explosive devices disguised as harmless items. The United States Department of Defense Law of War Manual gives watches, cameras, tobacco pipes, and headphones as examples of such items, which are prohibited to prevent the production of large quantities of dangerous objects that can be scattered around and are likely to be attractive to civilians, especially children. Many experts, however, are questioning whether the pagers constituted prohibited booby traps under Amended Protocol 2. Now, to discuss the principle of proportionality. Under the principle of proportionality, the attacker must assess whether the expected harm to civilians and civilian objects from this attack would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. William Boothby wrote, "It was an important question whether the incidental injury from these larger number of explosions was proportional to the military advantage expected." Giacomo Biggio of the University of Bristol Law School wrote that it should have been expected that collateral damage resulting from such an attack would be large, given that some of the devices exploded in crowded areas like supermarkets and funerals. An extremely high likelihood of harming civilians should have been anticipated. Biggio stated that Israeli government's interpretation of what constitutes excessive harm to civilians differs sharply from the interpretation given by the International Committee of the Red Cross. Janina Dill of the Oxford Institute for Ethics, Law and Armed Conflict doubted the attacks were proportionate, pointing out that people carry pagers to different places, including taking them home. She questioned whether, given hundreds of pagers exploding simultaneously, it was even possible for the attackers to make a meaningful calculation on the expected harm to civilians. So after examining all the aspects, is Israel in trouble for violating international law for this episode of Pagers Explosion? The answer is highly unlikely, and here's how. Mossad ensured plausible deniability by using intermediaries and by leaving enough ambiguity in the device's origin. Gold Apollo, the company originally linked to the pagers, denied manufacturing them, while BAC Consulting's role as an intermediary added another layer of obfuscation. This makes it difficult for Hezbollah and international observers to directly link the attack to Israel or Mossad, although many reports point to Mossad as the likely perpetrator. But one must accept that Mossad's operation was a masterclass in combining technology, espionage, and psychological warfare, hitting Hezbollah with a significant blow where it hurts the most while maintaining secrecy, plausible deniability. Thank you for watching.